at first, I felt sad after my son was diagnosed. And it's like you go on the internet, social media, and everyone is telling you that you're a horrible mother for feeling sad about it. And I felt very guilty for feeling the way I did. And so I didn't really talk about it until, the psychologist who diagnosed me with autism, her specialty is autism, actually. And I ended up opening up to her, right? She's a psychologist, became my therapist. And she told me, oh, but that's totally normal, what you're feeling. I was like, what? Everybody's telling me that it's not normal, that, I'm a horrible person.
Welcome back to A Mother's Guide Through Autism podcast. I'm Bridget Shipman, and I am your host. Today, we're going to be speaking with Eileen Lamb. Eileen Lamb is an author of All Across the Spectrum and Be the One. She's also the founder of the Autism Cafe. She's also a writer, photographer, and a podcast host. Born in France, Eileen now lives in Austin, Texas, with her two sons, Charlie, 10, and Jude, 7, and their baby sister, Billy. On her blog, she shares the ups and downs of raising a severely autistic child while being on the autism spectrum herself. Welcome, Eileen. Hi, welcome to A Mother's Guide Through Autism podcast. I'm Bridget Shipman, and today I'm going to be interviewing Eileen Lamb, and I'm really thrilled to have Eileen as a guest. You heard all about her success, the books she's written, the work she does in the introduction with her bio. And so welcome, Eileen, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I'm excited to dive right in because, first of all, we visited just a little bit before we hit the record button, and I'm already fascinated with everything that you do in the autism community. And I would love it if you could share your personal journey with autism. You are a mother of 3, and one of your sons is severely autistic. You yourself are a high-functioning autistic. Tell us how the autism journey started with your son and also how you were diagnosed.
So it all started when my son was 18 months old-ish, and he stopped talking. So at first we thought that maybe because I was speaking French to him, he was like struggling to understand both languages and to get the words out. But then his behavior started changing. Like he would just like line up his toys all day long, and he just seemed like in his own world all the time. It was very hard to have interactions with him. So I talked to one of my friends at the time who had an autistic child, and she told me to take the MChat online. It's like a test that's very simple. It was designed by Autism Speaks. It's on their website. You can, it's 20 questions, and it just tells you if your child is at risk for autism, basically. And I think any score above 3 is risk for autism, and Charlie scored 18. So that rings some alarm bells. And that's kind of how we got started. He got ECI, which is early childhood intervention, but that just wasn't enough. So that's when we were referred to a developmental pediatrician for an evaluation. And at 22 months old, he was diagnosed with autism. So that's how Charlie was diagnosed, which was pretty early. It wasn't even 2. And so my mom is in France. I told her, obviously my entire family is in France, and she was like, well, that's such an American thing. That can be possible. You were the exact same way as a child. And it's just like kind of got some things going in my head, because I knew Charlie was autistic. Like there was no doubt in my head. Like I knew the doctor was right, But I started talking about how I was as a child with my mom, and it's like I've always felt different. I had so many struggles as a child, and so that was it. And I sat with it, and but as the months went by, I started being served some ads on Facebook because I started speaking about autism, right? And one of them was signs of autism in adults, and there was like a little test. So I took that, and it came up as high risk for autism. And there were just so many signs that I wanted to get evaluated. I reached a point where I was like, I need answers for myself, because it can be a lot of things. You can have autistic traits and not be autistic. I feel like a lot of people these days are like, oh, I do this and that, I have autism, but it's really not how it works. So anyway, I went through a full-on therapeutic assessment, and at the end of it, I was diagnosed with autism.
Were you diagnosed in France or in the US?
Oh no, in the US. All of this was in the US. Yeah, my son was born in the US, and I was all in the US. Yeah.
And Charlie is how old?
So he's gonna be 10 tomorrow.
10 tomorrow. So when this airs, Charlie will be 10.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit more about your other kids and how Charlie's doing and how you're doing after getting diagnosed.
So my other child, I have two other. My other son, Jude, is 7, and he was diagnosed with level 1 autism too, actually. He started getting evaluated when he had a speech delay, but we did the ADOS, which is what they use to diagnose autism. He did it when he was about 2, and he scored 1 point off being not autistic. But she saw so many autism signs, she was like, you know what, let's give him some time and come back when he's 5. And at 5, he was diagnosed because he was way above the cutoff. But for him, it's really not like with Charlie. He's like very social. His struggles are so different from Charlie. Charlie, so he's 10 now. He's still nonverbal. He communicates with an app on his iPad, and it's just basic needs. He can't tell us what he likes, how he's feeling. It's mostly I want, and then a food item, like I want cookie, basically. But it's great that he can do that. I'm thankful for it. But he has a lot of behaviors, and life is definitely hard for him in more ways than it is for someone like me or my other son who have level 1 autism, high functioning autism. So yeah, and then I have a baby who's 6 months old.
Yes, that's awesome. It's really interesting because you're really experiencing like a lot on the autism spectrum with you yourself getting diagnosed later in life with a high functioning autistic child and then a child that's severely autistic. So you have a lot of insight that I'm sure any mom or any person that is listening to us right now they're gonna learn so much from you. I know we're doing a grief series, and I'm a real advocate. That's what I do. I coach moms and I help them navigate their own lives along with their children. And so one of the things that come up is grief. So what was your initial reaction to your son's diagnosis, and what were some of the biggest struggles that you experienced during that time?
The grief, that's a hard one, because at first, I felt sad after my son was diagnosed. And it's like you go on the internet, social media, and everyone is telling you that you're a horrible mother for feeling sad about it. And I felt very guilty for feeling the way I did. And so I didn't really talk about it until, the psychologist who diagnosed me with autism, her specialty is autism, actually. And I ended up opening up to her, right? She's a psychologist, became my therapist. And she told me, oh, but that's totally normal, what you're feeling. I was like, what? Everybody's telling me that it's not normal, that, I'm a horrible person. But it's really not a big deal. I mean, it's, if you stay in your grief and like you don't move on and you hate your child, that's one thing. But like feeling sad about the life that your child will never have, about all like the things you wanted for them, like things we take for granted, like I never thought, and maybe that's my fault, but like I would have to take care of my son for his entire life, plus after I'm dead, because that's a reality for many families who have kids on the severe end of the spectrum, is that uh, it doesn't end when we pass away. We need to make sure that they're taken care of after we die, and I just really wanted my son to be happy, and I don't know if he is. First of all, he can't tell me. But also, like, there are so many things that he'll most likely never do, talk is one of them, but like self-care things, the way he hurts himself, self-injurious behaviors, the aggression sometimes on his, brother and us and other people, the way he puts himself in danger because he doesn't understand, like he sees water, he thinks that's fun, so he runs, but he doesn't know how to swim. Running in front of cars, eating, putting non-edible items in his mouth, all of these things that like he deserves to have a life that's not so hard. And us too as parents, I think it's okay to say it, because it takes a toll on parents to have to be on constant alert, like 24/7, to make sure that your child is like safe, happy, and yeah, it's a lot. So I was really relieved when my therapist told me that it's okay to grieve.
Yeah. And I love that you're sharing that, because, there's probably somebody listening right now that feels really guilty and is hard on themselves for having those feelings. But, we feel what we feel. And I think giving yourself permission to feel things is a good thing. I do believe that we still get to have our dreams, and we still get to feel joy as much as possible. And that's why I think this topic is important, because I think a lot of moms skip right over that, you know. But I was also curious with yourself, because I do run across some people that ask me, do you think I'm on the spectrum? I'm like, well, first of all, I don't diagnose. That's not what I do. But I've been around autism enough where I might get a few, hunches like, oh, maybe if you're feeling that way, maybe go get tested and find out. So what was it like growing up when you weren't diagnosed? What was that like, undiagnosed autism?
Honestly, that was so hard, because it was like I always felt left out and different and alone and misunderstood. And I always thought, what's wrong with me? I kept wondering as a child why I didn't fit in, why other kids were mean to me, and they didn't seem to be mean with other kids. Like, what was it about me? Like, I felt like I was a victim constantly, but I didn't understand why. I didn't have a good grasp on it. Like, I listened to music, French music from the 30s, and they were all listening to, well, at the time, the 90s, because that's what it was the 90s. And I just didn't like it. And it was just like really hard to, I had to like pretend I was interested in, to join conversation. I like to play like chess and to read, and they were all into like other type of, it was just like really difficult. And I was hyperlexic too, which sounds like a great thing too. If you don't know, it's like I basically learned to like read and write when I was 3 years old. So I was very advanced, like academically. And it sounds great on paper, but it brings a lot of issues. Like, first of all, I was bored at school, and it was like really hard to enjoy school. Like, you don't have friends, and you're also not enjoying what you're learning at school. So like, it was so boring, and I ended up developing like school anxiety, because I was always in my thoughts. Then I started overthinking. So, and I also never learned to learn, because it always came to me so naturally, and it's like I was like born knowing things. It was just so weird. And then comes high school, and I don't know the things, and I had no idea how to learn, and I didn't enjoy it. And then I started failing, and everybody had such high expectations for me because I always, and yeah, so there were a lot of things that were hard. And then once I finally got the diagnosis, it's like, oh, it wasn't just my fault. It's just like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's me, but there's nothing wrong with me. It was just my brain is wired differently. That's why, every time people wanted to go to the fireworks or concerts, when I was like, what the heck? No, I'm not doing that. I hate it. It's so loud and there's people everywhere. I just couldn't understand why people like that stuff. I mean, even to this day, I think it's weird, but whatever. Now I understand that I'm different, but there's nothing wrong with it.
No, I think it's beautiful. And my son Joseph is also hyperlexic. Um, um, and I say I don't diagnose, but I was the one who found it. This was back in the 90s too. So I understand that completely. It can be a great thing, and then it can be add to your challenges. Is your husband also on the spectrum? I know we don't have that down, but I thought, okay. So you did manage to have a wonderful, you find a husband and you're having a wonderful relationship. So has that been difficult as a person on the spectrum?
What's difficult really is like friendships. I just, in my life, I've never had a relationship last in my entire life. And it's crazy because sometimes I feel like I'm very close to people. Like we'll talk on the phone every day. And then from one day to the other, I don't know. I mean, I can't even explain to you, but I just can't maintain friendships, and I don't understand why. Because I feel like I understand like social rules and stuff now, and still somehow I can't have friends, like real relationships. And it's hard because, like I said, I feel like I'm understanding. So I'm like, am I just unlucky with the friends I found? Because it feels good when I'm in the relationship. Like, is it one-sided? Am I not picking up on something?
Mhm.
So I don't know, I'm in my mid-30s now, and just not being able to have friends, especially because, autism, it gets lonely. So, work and then autism, just so much autism everywhere. And I would like to have a relationship outside of the home where I can just kind of like forget a little bit about autism and, you know, uh, unwind.
Yeah, so I would love to visit with you just sometime after our interview, because I have so many hunches right now, because yeah, it would be confusing because I mean, I look at you, I hear you, I see you, and it would be hard for me to even understand why that's going on for you. But I have coached other young people that are on the spectrum, and that is a challenge. I think relationships and friendships are really, really, really tough because you don't know what the underlying cues are. And by the way, for neurotypical people, those are tough too.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I'm just like, well, I'm sitting here thinking, well, yeah. But if then you add that on top of it, I understand that. I know that we brought up the topic of grief, but I do want to talk to you. So I have so many hunches of different kinds of grief that we've already talked about with your life and your experience. And you wrote a beautiful article called "It's Okay to Grieve." And in it, you talk about how it felt like a weight lifted off your shoulders and you said that when your therapist told you those exact words. Is there anything that you want to add that we haven't covered, that you wrote about in that article? Because I think it's important for other moms to hear that.
I mean, just what I was saying earlier, that, despite what everybody is saying online, I think it's kind of like a vicious circle, is that you keep hearing how it's not okay. to have these feelings. So then, you start feeling bad about them and you hide them. So you don't talk about them and less people talk about them. And then we just feel like so alone because nobody is sharing these feelings. So we start feeling like we're the only ones feeling that way, which is absolutely not true. And I think that's why I share what I share, because like I said, I struggle so much. And, I'm an only child. And I felt so lonely, I guess, growing up and after my son's diagnosis, because, I felt like a lot of parents, they had kiddos on the spectrum, but none were like Charlie. And, Charlie's really severe and it was hard to connect. And I found that, now there's a community out there of people who are trying to say that severe autism isn't a thing, that everybody is equally autistic. And so again, parents stop sharing about that, because if they do, they get, insulted, harassed on social media. And I think all of these subjects have become like taboo in a way, when they never should have been in the first place. And I just hope people can start opening up and finding the courage to just not care about the negativity out there, because we need people talking about, the good parts of autism, or like sharing successes, but we also need to talk about what's hard about it so we can connect.
Yes, yes. And I do. I mean, I'm pretty out there. And if someone gets upset with me for me being vulnerable and sharing how I felt and things that make me sad, then I just say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm pretty sure there's somebody else out there that feels sad about an autism diagnosis as well. So I'm willing to stick my neck out there. So if I do offend somebody, certainly that's not my intention, but I'm also not going to stop talking about it, because the intention is exactly what you're talking about, to really be able to open up, be honest with your feelings, talk about it so that you don't feel the guilt and the shame that's all encompassed in it, which, you courageously talked about the autism issues despite the criticisms that are outright hateful. This is what you're talking about. And you wrote an article about bullying and the dark side of the neurodiversity movement. Would you shed some light on that? Would you like to add anything about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, there is that vocal minority of people who just see their autism as a gift, I guess. And that's fine, as long as they're only talking about their autism and not autism in general. I think I'm a big advocate of, each autistic person gets to decide what they want, what they like. Like, for instance, I love the puzzle piece. I know a lot hate it. I mean, that's fine. They can hate it, but they shouldn't tell people, oh, the autism, the puzzle piece is harmful, or the autistic community does not like the puzzle piece. I just don't want anybody speaking on behalf of the entire community, because we're not a monolith, and that's not possible to talk on behalf of everybody. There's no majority. We all have different opinions. We're all different people. But anyway, there's that vocal minority of people who's just been attacking people online, and not just a few of them. They're very vocal, and when they attack, it's a lot of them at the same time. And, they insult, they will report your page, and, for things like we were talking about earlier, like just talking about severe autism. I'm talking about this one specifically because that's something I get attacked for a lot, because I use the term severe autism, which is my son's official diagnosis, level 3. So it's really strange to me how they're trying to push back on it. They're saying that all autistic people are as autistic, that there's no levels, because the only difference is that level 1 autistic people are masking. And, I understand masking to a certain extent, but my son, Charlie, he doesn't even know there is something to mask, He doesn't even know he has autism. He'll require 24/7 support for life. You know, how is that comparable to me, who's like talking to you on this podcast right now? So like, sure, I may need help going to the grocery store. You're not gonna see me like, you know, crowd, and I can't maintain friendships. But how is it comparable to someone like not able to communicate? I mean, my son was in the ICU last year, and no doctor could figure out what was going on. It was like his vitals were bottom low, both blood pressure and heart rate, and nobody could figure it out. And he could not tell us, not even point to like anything that was bothering him, which clearly there was something. Like, that's how severe autism can be. Like, it just feels so dismissive for them to say that it's not real. Not only that, but then they go and they attack. So that's what I'm talking about in my post. It's all of these attacks on people who don't share their opinion. So like, I use the term severe autism. That shouldn't even be an opinion, but I get attacked for that. I use the puzzle piece. I get attacked. I say I have level 1 autism, or I have autism. I get attacked. You know, anything I do, I just get attacked because they don't agree with me. Just that vocal minority, you know? And it's the same thing as with grieving. The issue is that people are afraid now. They don't talk about what they want to talk about as much because they're afraid of being bullied. So basically that community has bullied people into silence. And that's where we're at right now.
Yes. And do you feel like this is a big movement, or do you think it's just something that started that is winding down? I mean, are they still bullying you for currently, or was this like in the early 2000s ish when, it became somewhat political?
No, it's getting worse and worse. One of their private group where you can only join if, you refer to yourself as autistic and not have autism, where you're not allowed to talk about the puzzle piece. They have 100,000, probably 150,000, I want to say now. So it's growing. It's growing, and you can see on social media, they're just all repeating the same thing. You're not allowed to speak about autism unless you have autism. The puzzle piece is a hate symbol. Using person with autism instead of autistic is ableist. I mean, it's always the same thing. ABA is abuse. And the movement is just growing, especially with TikTok. And now you have a lot of people who are like self-diagnosing themselves. And, it's a lot. And no, I still get the hate every time I post on social media. It's not slowing down one bit.
Well, I personally am really proud that you're speaking up for yourself, because I know that's really hard to do, because my experience has been on the journey as an advocate for my son. I have also been, judged this and that, not a good mom, so forth. But I think I'm finally to an age where I'm like, well, I'm so sorry that you feel that way, but I'm telling this is my story. And if I use the wrong word, my intention behind it is what matters. So all we're trying to do here is navigate our own autism journey. You for yourself, me for myself, Joseph for himself. And I would like to see some respect for each other and love for each other, that we come together as a community, and let's not make it harder than it already is. So kudos to you for expressing yourself, for coming forth. And when that movement does attack you, you just know you're doing yourself, and that really is their issue. Because I do feel like when I coach people, we live in 3 lanes. We live in our lane, others' lane, and then whatever you believe in lane. And I can't possibly navigate everybody. I just can't. So all I can do is do our best, learn from it, and let's move on. But I want to support people in the autism community, not attack them. So I'm supporting you. You wrote a book called All Across the Spectrum, in which you talk about your autism journey. You wrote a book called Be the One, which discusses the power of vulnerability, which is what you and I are doing right now. We're being very vulnerable. Tell us about that.
So I wrote my first book, All Across the Spectrum, a while ago. It was published in 2019. I think it was important for me to share the spectrum, right? That's why it's called All Over the Spectrum, because I thought it was interesting that I have both perspectives, being an autistic adult with level 1 autism and raising a child with level 3 autism. So there were both aspects in my book, because being high functioning autistic, it's, even though it's obviously not the same as level 3, it still comes with challenges, right? And I talk about those in my book, and I talk about level 3 challenges and what it was like to live with undiagnosed autism, and also being diagnosed as an adult. So that would be my first book, All Across the Spectrum. It has my photography in it because I take pictures. I guess I'm a photographer. And it's kind of like a nice coffee table book, easy read. And then my second book is called Be the One. And that one is just a very, very small book with a bunch of text about anxiety, social media, relationships. It's just, yeah, it's really vulnerable, but I think a lot of people will relate. It was very important for me to write that book because it was like the book I would have wanted to read in my hardest moments, just like people telling me that what I'm feeling is okay, even though you don't see other people talking about it on social media, that other people are feeling that way. That's really what I wanted to put out there when I wrote that book. And I think I did a good job at it.
I love that you wrote both of those. And so before we go today, I'm going to ask you to let people know where they can get a copy and where they can find you. But before we do that, first of all, congratulations on those books. I love it. What are the biggest lessons you've learned as a mother on this journey?
I think it's to not take anything for granted. Like for instance, with my my daughter, who's 6 months old now, when my middle son Jude was a baby, Charlie was 2.5 when he was born, and I always picture that beautiful relationship of them, like playing together, interacting. I picture the moment Charlie would meet his baby brother and be like, and that never happened. And the years went by and it never really happened. Charlie used to eat Jude as a baby. So, it was tough. So when my daughter was born 7 years later, I had no expectation. Like I knew that most likely he would just ignore her or get annoyed if she cried. And he had a few very nice moments with her recently. And I feel like these moments, they're worth more, if that makes sense, because I did not take them for granted, and I'm able to like appreciate the little things more with autism. I think that's something autism really has taught me. I'm a lot more patient than I thought I could be in a lot of ways. And also, what else autism has taught me? Probably that, there is that saying from Dr. Stephen Shore, if you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person. And I think people need to remember that too, that just because your wife's cousin, uncle, whatever, as a child on the spectrum doesn't mean that all kids are going to be like that. You got to learn from every single autistic person, not just one.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Joseph, my son, says that all the time as well. And so I do listen. He has been by far my best teacher. He's made me a much better person. And so I'm really grateful that that he picked me to be his mom, because I believe he did. Is there any advice that you want to give moms?
Just trust your gut. Don't be afraid of your feelings. Find the people you connect with. Ignore the rest, because you're gonna see so much negativity on social media, and most of the time it's not funded, and you're probably doing a great job. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention before we go?
No, I think I went over everything.
Yeah, you did. And this has been everything that I thought it would be. Where can people go to find out more about your work, connect with you, buy your books? Where do they go?
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram at the Autism Cafe, TheAutismCafe, the Autism Cafe. It's kind of like a wink to like France, cafe, autism.
I like that. I saw that. I thought that is such a cool name.
I guess I started doing TikTok, but might get banned. It's at Eileen Lamb on TikTok. And then my books are available on Amazon, and it's all across the spectrum. Is the one about autism, and the one about all the vulnerable text is called Be the One. Be the One.
Wonderful. So we will be sharing that information with our listeners. And if you all enjoy this episode of A Mother's Guide Through Autism, please please subscribe, so that we can get to as many moms out there, or anybody who's an avid listener, any parents, any teachers, because this podcast is all about knowledge, hope, and inspiration. And we're going to continue to spread that. And more than anything, be kind. Be kind to others, be kind to yourself. Give yourself permission to grieve. And I will be back in the next episode as we continue our discussion and series on grief and how to navigate that. I'll see you in the next episode.